So today I'm going to show you how to install a door hinge perfectly with the proper carpentry techniques so that you get a perfect finish every single time. Not only am I going to show you how to install a hinge perfectly, but also this is about teaching you some proper carpentry techniques that you can take away and use on your jobs at home. Before we go installing a hinge, let me run you through the tools that you're going to need for this job. First of all, a simple pencil. These tracer pencils are really great for any carpentry or woodwork or any other DIY work around the house. And they're so good that I think one of you could benefit from a little giveaway today. So keep watching until later on in the video and I'll be sending one of you guys one of these, but I'll be giving you the details later on, so stay tuned. You'll also benefit from a marking gauge. These are quite inexpensive, so grab yourself one. You'll also need a set square of some description and one or two nice sharp chisels. Now you should almost be able to shave the hairs on your arm with these chisels. You don't want to be using any old chisels that you've used to do demolition with. We've all got them in our toolbox. Leave them in the toolbox. Grab a nice sharp chisel. They need to be razor sharp. And an old trusty hammer. You don't want anything too heavy because you'll end up over penetrating into the wood grain. A Stanley knife can come in handy, but it's not essential. And of course, a screwdriver to screw your hinge to the door. You'll also need a tape measure, a combi drill, and one of these self-centering drill bits will also come in handy. Right, so let's make a start, but before we do, please make sure you're subscribed because there's loads of content coming to the channel throughout 2022 and you're not going to want to miss it, so make sure you're subscribed. And if the video helps you out, make sure you give me a like because that helps this video reach and help more people on YouTube, so make sure you hit that like button for me. Before we go any further, make sure that the door that you're working on is held steady so that you can work on the door at a good height and that there's no movement as you're working on the door. Today we are fitting a 3-inch butt hinge. Now butt hinges come in a few different sizes, but these 3-inch butt hinges you'll typically find used on a moulded internal door inside your home. But where do we need to place this on the door? So if you're using a moulded door like we are, they're actually full of a load of cardboard inside and there's not much structure to them. Now if you look on the bottom of this door, you'll see it says lock there. So we'll need to place our hinges on the opposite side of the door to where it says lock. So now grab a pencil and a tape measure and we're going to work out where we need to put the hinge along the length of the door. Now the proper carpentry technique to placing a hinge on a new door is to place your top hinge 6 inches from the top. So your hinge would start at that 6-inch mark from the top of the door and your bottom hinge would be 9 inches from the bottom of the door. If you were using 3 hinges, your middle hinge would be spaced between the two. Now the reason you would place that bottom hinge higher up is actually because of an optical illusion called foreshortening, I believe, and that is where when you're looking at the bottom of a door, that bottom hinge would appear lower than what it is. So you need to bring it up slightly, otherwise it would look far too low when looking at it from the human eye. So that's the reason you place them in that location. However, if your door is a replacement and it's going into a frame that already has recesses cut out for the previous hinges, then I'd advise that you now go away and measure exactly where your hinges need to be placed. So mark your hinge location. In this case, it's 6 inches exactly from the top of the door. Mark that with a little tick from your pencil. Next step, we'll put the hinge in place so that we can make a small tick the other end of the hinge. Put your hinge along the top of the first mark that you made and make another small tick at the bottom of the hinge. Please don't draw around the hinge. It is not good practice. I do not encourage it. It won't help your carpentry skills to develop. This is about learning a skill as much as it is about learning how to fit a hinge. In woodworking, we use tools to get things square. So use your set square to make a mark along that original tick line. And when you're doing this bit, make sure you're using a good sharp pencil. Again, these tracers are brilliant because this job is all about attention to detail. And if you get it wrong, the hinge will look sloppy inside that recessed area that you make. So we need to make sure we're being very accurate when we're doing this part. So now we have our two lines perfectly spaced apart. We'll look at which way round we're going to fit this hinge. So typically when we're fitting a butt hinge, if you look at the butt hinge itself, when you look at the hinge, this is called the open leaf because it has a gap down here, and this side is called the fixed leaf. So we're going to fit the hinge with the open leaf on the door and the fixed leaf on the frame, and that is typically how a joiner would fit this hinge. There'll also be writing on the hinge, and that should face outwards so that you can read it as well. Grab hold of your hinge and your marking gauge, and this little point here is what we're going to use to mark the door. So loosen off the foot, move the marking gauge until the point sits on the edge of the hinge so that we get an exact measurement onto the door, and that will give you the exact line that we need along the door. Now you need to be very careful that you don't overshoot, because like I said, this is all about attention to detail, and if we overshoot the lines either side, you'll end up with an indentation, and you'll see that once you paint it. Start on your first mark, give it a gentle push, and that will make an indentation along the door, and then stop on your second line. Now hopefully you can see that that has made an indentation in the wood that we can run our pencil line into. We can grab our pencil and then run that pencil along that indentation in the wood to give us a perfect mark to work to. Now the leaves on these butt hinges are 2mm thick. Now we need to set our marking gauge to 2mm so that that gives us the correct depth of cut along the door. So again, loosen off your marking gauge slightly, and you can drag the rail all the way through until you have that 2mm measurement, or on some of these marking gauges you'll actually have 2mm marked on the top of the gauge like I do here. So tighten that up. Again, don't go too heavy with this, and don't overshoot those top marks or you will make an indentation into the door. We now have a nice little line there that we can run our pencil in, as you can see there. So this here is the material that we'll now be removing. Now I'll show you how to accurately remove that material using a very sharp chisel. So what we'll do now is we'll create a stop cut along our line. Now you need to use a chisel that's long enough to do this in one strike. If you do it in one strike of the blade, you're going to get a cleaner cut along your stop line. Now the purpose of creating a stop line here is to first of all stop the grain from splitting when we remove the material, but secondly to stop a horrible bruising effect that you will get along the material if you don't use a stop line. Your aim with your stop line is just to create an indent into the timber. It's not to cut full depth as of yet. So be very slightly on the inside of that line. You don't want to be over here somewhere, because if you're over here somewhere you'll take out too much material. When you create this first line, hit the chisel at a very, very slight angle. So you can see there that we now have a stop line just deep enough to run our nail in. That is the perfect depth with no bruising on the edge of the wood. Now for the back edge, the chisel will actually fall into that indentation that you made with your marking gauge, and again just give that a light tap. You don't want to go mad here, because you're working with the grain of the wood, and if you do it too hard you'll risk splitting or bruising the wood. And now do the same along this edge here. So now what we'll do is we'll go back in and we'll put a good stop line 1 millimeter in from our original housing out, and that deeper stop line there wants to be around that 2mm depth, and we'll repeat that process all the way around. And you can see there why we made that original indentation, because there's now a bruising effect on the inside of our line, so we're not going to see that on our finished product. So you can see there why we actually do that in the first place and how it gives us that perfect finish. So now what we'll do is we'll make a series of notches so that we can remove the material a lot easier, and those notches want to be just under that 2mm mark that we've made there. Don't go too deep, because you can always remove more material but you can't put it back. So now we've made a series of notches, we can start removing some material. You'll see how easy the material will move away because of the amount of notches that we've made in that material. It is now weakened within that stop line. So we can start going in with our chisel from the top and removing some of this material now. For now, leave those stop lines in place, and you can just use your hands, no hammer required, and there you go, our stop line has actually fallen away, so now we need to be a little bit more careful of that edge. We can start working very gently into the edge now. Give that hinge another check, and we're not far out now, so we'll start cleaning up along that original stop line that we made very gently and remove any excess material along that stop line. Be very careful, particularly along the back line here, because of the way that the grain runs. You can end up following the grain with your chisel. Just tidy everything up. Now we can try our hinge again and see if there's any high spots where we may need to remove a touch more material. Now once you're happy, you can check that it's flush using any straight edge, just to check that it sits down perfectly and that you've not got any raised areas. So that is the recess cut for our hinge, and you can see how clean of a job that is. So what we'll do now is we'll go ahead and fit the hinge. But before we do, let's talk about my little giveaway. This is the bit you've all been waiting for, I know. I've got to say, this is not sponsored. This pencil is just a spare that I have. It's coming out of my own pocket. But I want to give something back to my subscribers that make this channel possible. I wish I could send you all one. Unfortunately, I've only got one. The first step to winning this pencil is to be a subscriber. So if you're not already, hit the subscribe button now. And the second thing you need to do to win is to drop a comment below and let me know why you want this pencil and what your next project's going to be. And I will pick a winner from those comments down below. And the winner will be announced in my next video, so make sure you check out the next video and see if you win. And don't worry, if you don't win, there's a link in the description where you can get one of these. So there's a couple of ways that you could fit the hinge to the door. Now, the easiest way to do that is one of these self-centering drill bits. I'll stick a link in the description where you can pick one of these up, and you can use that to then pilot hole each one of these holes. I'll show you how that works. Because the hinge holes are countersunk, you need to make sure that your screw goes perfectly in the middle of each one of these holes. If it doesn't, the screw will sit raised, and not only will that look messy after you've just done all this nice neat work, you could actually impede the hinge. And make a little pilot hole. And now you can go ahead and put your screws in. Just go ahead and finish tightening all your screws up. You don't need to over tighten the screws or go mad or anything. You can see, using some simple carpentry techniques, you can see how perfectly you can actually get that hinge installed on the door. That is it. That's our hinge installed perfectly on the door. I hope you found the video useful. If you have, please like it, because it helps the video reach more people and help more people on YouTube, and ultimately that is my aim, is to teach you a skill and help you out. Now make sure you subscribe, because you don't want to miss out on any of the content to come this year, and I've got a lot planned for you. There's links to a lot of the handy little tools I've used in the description below, so make sure you go check them out if you want to give this job a go and grab a few of them bits to help you along your way. And don't forget the little competition for the pencil. I'll be announcing the winner for that in the next one, so make sure you watch the next video as well, because it could be you. Thanks as always for watching the DIY guy, and I'll see you guys in the next one.